Hello and welcome to the first episode of Di's Dead Doves. My name's Diana. Most people call me Di. Now this video is going to be about fandom. Specifically, we're discussing supernatural fandom and the tropes that are inherent to the fanon as opposed to canon, of course. I do have some disclaimers to list just because I know myself. Okay, so we are going to be discussing things that some people might find triggery. Because I delve into the dark side of fanfiction, we will be talking about subjects that most people find uncomfortable. Things like incest, underage, non-consensual sex, or not that that's a real thing, but non-consensual sex is just another term for rape, is what I mean. Not that it doesn't exist. And even bestiality. Now, if you find these subjects triggering, I completely understand. I just think it's about time that you back out of this video, because even though I could put tags for everything I could possibly talk about in the episode description, it would probably just be safer to, if you know that you have some serious triggers when it comes to taboo sexual topics, to probably just avoid the video. Now, the name of the channel is Di's Dead Doves. This is a reference to a fandom tag, which is a reference to a Arrested Development's episode where there's a bag in a fridge that says, "Dead dove, do not eat." And someone picks up the bag and looks in it and says, "I don't know what I expected." Basically, it is what it says on the tin. So I just want to let you guys all know, or let you folks all know, that I could be talking about subjects that you might find uncomfortable, and I want you to be aware of it. So let's get into it. So the subject we're talking about today is supernatural. Now, if you've never watched the show Supernatural, this might end up being a bit spoilery for you. I probably won't discuss specifics of anything after, season 10 maybe. But I will at least vaguely touch on topics that go throughout the whole show. So be aware of that. If you've never watched Supernatural and you're thinking about it because you're thinking about getting into the fandom, in general, it's a show about two brothers traveling across the country, fighting monsters and saving the world. And also getting closer to each other. Now, the fanfiction for this universe has been around since the show started. The two most popular pairings in this fandom are the one that's on my shirt, Destiel, and my personal ship, Wincest. I know, right? To explain what these two pairings are, Destiel is Dean Winchester and Castiel. Castiel is an angel. He's introduced in season 4. If you've watched the show, you already know that. Now, there's no explicit canon basis for the ship. They have a profound bond, and they flirt a lot. There's lots of script evidence, like apparently some of the script tags say things like eye fucking when they're staring each other in the eye. They're staring each other in the eyes. And there's a lot of just awkward moments. The other ship, Wincest, stands for Winchester Incest. And it is Sam Winchester and Dean Winchester, who are brothers. Now, there aren't many fandoms that have an incest ship as one of their top ships. I would say Supernatural is one of the rare ones, though they're not entirely unique in that. There's a few others that the most popular ships are incest, but I'd say Supernatural is unique in a way on that one. Now, the things that we find the most often in fan fiction for Supernatural, I decided to compile a little list so that I wouldn't have to have it memorized. But I won't be staring at my phone the whole time, I promise, because that just doesn't look good. Okay, so I said the most popular ships, which we have Destiel and Wincest. Now, other ships that you'll run into is, of course, a combination of the three, which they usually call Wincestiel, unless Dean and Sam are in this universe not related, and then they usually call it Sam Cass Dean, which isn't as catchy if you ask me, but everybody has their choices. There's also Sabriel, which is Sam and Gabriel. This is by no means a complete list, because you can ship any characters, and the show has, I want to say hundreds, but at least dozens. So, when it comes to slash ships, you've got, of course, got Gabriel and Castiel, Dean and Crowley, Bobby and Crowley, which is one of the only slash ships to get an on-screen kiss, I think. Even if it wasn't actually a romantic pairing at the time, or ever. It was a kiss to seal a deal. Either way, you know what I'm talking about. Castiel and Crowley, there's some banter and back and forth. One of the other ships that's common is Denny, which is Dean and Benny. Benny is Benny Lafitte. He's a vampire that's introduced. I should probably remember what season, but I don't. I think it's season 8. And that's a fairly common ship. But there's also het ships, which are most likely to be canon. Some of them have had explicit canon flirtation. Some of them have just had hints of it. Other ones have actually been canon ships that they've actually explored, like Sam, Eileen, Gabriel and Rowena, Sam and Jess. Now the other canon ship, in some ways, that actually is the only slash ship to have at least referenced explicit sexual scenes, even if they are non-consensual sexual scenes, would be Sam and Lucifer, often called Samifer. In canon, they have a couple of lines like, Lucifer says something along the lines of, I missed you, Sam, the rapier wit, the wittier rape. Sam's just spent, around 100 years in hell trapped in a cage with Lucifer at this point, so we can surmise what's been going on down there. At another point in time, Sam ends up back in the cage, and Lucifer makes a joke about, oh, hi, bunkmate, would you want top bunk, bottom bunk, or would you like to share? So, there's definitely some implication. Some other characters mention that the angels will be in the cage hate banging Sam, I believe is the line that's used. And I think at one point in time someone says something about making him his bitch in every sense of the word. So, not that it's a good representation, but it's more canon than any of the other slash ships, I'd say. But that's an opinion. I'm not gonna try to crush any other ship dreams or even try to make you ship something that I did. Now, there are so many other ships. One of the ones that I commonly write is Dean, Sam, Cass, Gabriel. Now, Castiel and Gabriel are both angels. They refer to each other as brothers, but we don't exactly look at the angels as the same kind of familial relationship as humans have. because they would all be related, basically in the same way that all human beings would be related, as in they're created by the same being. Either way, that's not exactly the point. Now, the tropes that you see. So Supernatural happens to be a huge fandom with hundreds of thousands of stories on AO3. And that's just on Archive of Our Own, not on the internet in general, because I'm sure there's even more. I just spend most of my time on that particular website. Now, the tropes that I thought were worth mentioning, which I see the most often, is you've got Sam and Dean growing up together and growing closer, okay? A lot of it's pre-series, what we like to call recessed, where Sam and Dean are teenagers. So you do have several inherent issues there with the fact that there's a 4-year age gap, so when Dean is 18, Sam's 14. I do find that the most common ages to find in fics when it comes to recessed are Sam being 16 and Dean being 20. I've written younger than that or older than that, depending on how it fit the story. But that seems to be the most common one when it comes to the first time kind of thing. And scientifically, there's a lot of things about trauma bonding, and there's some basis for how this could really happen in real life, and does really happen in real life, though people don't really talk about it. I personally really enjoy those. I love some good mutual pining, and recessed fics are usually really good for that, and the whole giving in to desire thing. I've also got Destiel Profound Bond written down. Destiel Profound Bond, because there's a lot of stories that use the idea that Sam and Dean, that Dean and Cass are somehow soulmates in some way, because of the bond that happened when Castiel rescued Dean. Now, canonically, Sam and Dean are actually soulmates, and that term is used in heaven to describe their bond. But obviously it doesn't have to be a sexual bond just because it's a soulmate bond. Some of us would like that to be true more than others. So, let's see. I also have, ABO. That stands for Alpha Beta Omegaverse, or Alpha Beta Omega Dynamics, also just called Omegaverse. Supernatural is actually the place that started. It was on a message board at some point in time where somebody wrote it as a prompt that humans are born with secondary sexual characteristics, either alpha or omega, or neutral beta. Alpha usually means they are dominant, or they're dominant, they're in charge, and their secondary sexual characteristics are much like wolves. So you have the nodding thing. Omegas are typically more submissive. Society might treat them as lesser in some stories, and they also go into heat and can get pregnant no matter their gender. So it was originally definitely an exercise in impreg, or male pregnancy, a way to write that in a universe. Now we see that getting more legitimized now in mass market publications and stuff. There was even a recent lawsuit where someone claimed they had written the first story, and it was proved that they weren't the one. But it was a New York Times article that included the headline with the word wolf kink, which I will never not find hilarious. We have non-related AUs, where Sam and Dean meet some other way. There's coffee shops. Sam's working at a coffee shop in college, and Dean is a mechanic who fixes his car, and they're not related, and they fall in love. Some people find these stories more comfortable. Even though they want the dynamic of Sam and Dean, they don't want the incest angle, which that's perfectly valid, and that's up to them. I'll never judge anyone else on their kinks. I will also never shame anyone else for what they like, and I strongly encourage you to do the same. So, I've got high school, college, AU, same kind of thing. Usually in high school, college AUs, it's, that seems to be more common with bestiality. Whether it's, Dean is a student is a senior in high school, and Castiel is his new math teacher or English teacher, or he's just the nerdy student versus the jock. High school and college AUs are just ways to play with that trope. You also see those commonly in the non-related AUs that I was mentioning, or sometimes, sometimes in AUs in general. AU just stands for alternate universe. It just means these things are not how they happened in canon. Kid fics, that goes along usually with ABO, but sometimes it's just Castiel is a widower and with a daughter and is raising her on his own and meets Dean. They fall in love, that kind of thing. I'll also mention that Supernatural and the CW in general have a high percentage of what we call RPF, real person fics. Now, it's almost its own fandom at this point in time, so I won't go into it a lot, but the common ships are Jared and Jensen, the actors who play Sam and Dean, or Jensen and Misha, the actor who plays Castiel. So it's kind of along the same lines as the unrelated AUs, just a way to make a ship that someone already ships more legitimate. Now, in my opinion, RPFs they might as well be original stories. Most of the characterization and details are completely up to the authors. They don't use a lot of details from the actor's real life. They just use their names. Which is, once again, perfectly valid, and they're allowed to do that. I haven't written many myself, only because usually when I get an idea for one, it's more about, oh, this is an original story, I can just make up the characters. And that works for me. Now, kinks. I already mentioned incest, obviously, which doesn't have to be a kink. It's just a fact. But for some people, it's specifically something that they're into and a fetish. Now, sometimes you'll see, obviously, Sam and Dean, or even, I didn't even mention this, but Sam, Dean, and their father, John, is quite common. Or it will be an alternate universe where Castiel is another one of their brothers. Or Castiel and Gabriel are biologically brothers, and they're in a relationship together. There's a lot of ways to play it, and a lot of great things have been done with it. If it's something that makes you uncomfortable, obviously, watch the tags and avoid it. Age difference, I already touched on Sam and Dean's age difference, which, you know, it's only 4 years, but sometimes that can make a big difference. it also, in a lot of fics, they add to it and make it where Dean is, 20 years older than Sam, or Dean is Sam's father, or something like that. So they sometimes stretch the age differences into more than what is canon, but it's done pretty well. Angel-human taboo, that's done in so many different ways, it's almost hard to discuss, but basically the idea that angels are a species that humans know, and either humans look down on them as animals in some way, or angels look down on humans as animals in some way. And a lot of times that goes around with slavery or keeping them as pets. It's a broad thing. But in these stories, usually you get things like wing kink, where there's stuff about grooming each other's wings being a sexual fetish, or a turn on, or even just sometimes a bonding activity. There's also a lot of bestiality in the fandom. That's because canonically you have things like hellhounds and werewolves. Even the angel-human taboo I talked about, a lot of times that's written with that in mind, as if angels were a species of animal, and anything involving sleeping with an angel is the same as sleeping with an animal. BDSM, that can also end up, that's either just your classic, oh, this character likes spanked, or sometimes it's an entire universe, a lot like ABO, where humans are born with a secondary gender, which is either dominant or submissive, or switches, which is the same as like a beta. Those, I think Supernatural probably originated those, but I don't know for sure, so I don't want you to quote me on that. Those are the things worth mentioning. I was also going to mention like a few stories that I love in the fandom. Now, the first one I'm going to mention here is one I'll actually quote and read a snippet of. This one is called On Your Guard by Theproblematique. I will do a small caveat and say I do not know the gender of this author, but I have a habit of defaulting to female, even though I know that's wrong. I'm aware it's an issue I have. I will try to use they, them, because I don't know. But if I do slip up and say she, I apologize to this author, whose gender I do not know. But I did get their permission to read this clip. The fic is about an alternate universe that's closer to canon, but in it, hunters are known and monsters are known, and hunters have become celebrities, with Dean Winchester becoming like the biggest celebrity. Sam, on the other hand, has kind of went into hiding and crept away to college to go explore his own life, and he doesn't want to be a hunter or be in the spotlight. Now, Dean's like the poster boy for it, so he doesn't think it's okay. But this fic is huge on pining, and I'll give you a taste of that in the clip that I decided to read. Dean took another step, and it came at Sam again, that jarring new thought. His big brother was small, fragile, even, in need of protection. Suddenly Sam realized they were standing differently than two regular people who happened to be related to each other should stand. It wasn't just the closeness. It was the way Dean was looking up at him, and Sam had dipped his chin to mirror the gaze. But God, it was so hard to break away. Dean, Come with me, Dean muttered, entreating. It'll be like old times, before Hell's Gate, before just you and me, being brothers again. It sounded like heaven, and Sam should say no, but he'd said yes the moment Dean's life factored into this. Okay. The unfettered relief in Dean's face was akin to an invisible cuff firmly locking him in. For a long, silent moment, Sam felt himself get lost in the magnetic pull of Dean's gorgeous moonlit eyes. And then his neck twinged. It was an old, familiar ache that came from contorting all his restraint and tension into his shoulders and not tipping forward to close the horrible distance between their mouths, their bodies. It had been years since he'd felt it, but it was an effective reminder of the hurt he was signing himself up for. He stepped away, back towards the door, and told Dean to meet up with him later. Dean cleared his throat and nodded, rubbing the back of his head. I just kind of picked a section that showed the, interpersonal dynamic there because I love this author's take on pining. I will drop a link to this in the comments or the channel description, episode description? That's what I'm looking for. Episode description. It's one of my favorite stories, somewhere in the range of like 80,000 words. So on the longer side, but not huge. I've read it at least 6 times. I had a few others that I was going to at least mention. I thought if I gave a shout out to a Wincest story, I might as well give a shout out to a Destiel story. Now this one I'm not going to quote, but I will at least read the description. This one's Angels Wild. I read it years ago. It's by multiple authors. LimonadeGaby, Rise of the Fallen One. LimonadeGaby and Rise of the Fallen One. And there appears that there might have been a third account at one point in time. But I did get permission from Rise of the Fallen One to recommend this one. The summary of it is, it's one that I was talking about where angels are looked at like a predator, like a monster. And Dean is a hunter in this universe, and he's hunting angels, and he ends up finding one. But instead of them being everything he expected, they're something completely different. As I said, it's Destiel, and I will put a link in the episode description. Let's see, what else do I have to talk about? I have so much to ramble on about this subject, so I could literally talk for hours. Supernatural we are in our 15th and final season. I would say that the fandom has been going strong since day one, though some ships have grown as others have fallen off. I'd say we run into more poly ships as time goes on, but I don't know if that's quite true or just an impression that I've gathered. Also, there's the running joke that every woman that Sam Winchester ever dates dies, because it's like 8 out of 10 at this point. Something like that. It doesn't turn out well for them. One last thing is, when going into the fanfic world, make sure to read tags and watch your triggers. Be aware of what bothers you, and be aware that other people can write whatever they want. It's not hurting you just because you don't like it. Have a great night.